Hello again, and welcome back to the Fear and Beer podcast, where we talk all things horror, horror nights, and just a dash of beer. I'm Nick.
And I'm Shamus.
All right, and here we are one more time. Do we even need to keep track of which episode it is anymore?
12, right?
Yeah, or 11? I don't know.
No,
we drop it? Do we just...
No, because the 10th episode was the one about them canceling, and then last week was 11, so this is 12.
12. We're almost in our teen years.
We are at a dozen.
Yeah.
Next week will be a baker's dozen.
Yeah, almost at the teen years.
Which, completely off topic, unrelated, but baker's dozens, this made me think of it because we obviously talk about Universal a lot. Voodoo Donuts over at Universal Studios. If you get a chance to visit, go to Voodoo Donuts, and you don't have to buy one, but at least look at the coffin deal they got. So they basically they give you 4 baker's dozens in a friggin' coffin.
Ooh.
It's pretty cool. I mean, it's relevant to our podcast. If I did that, I'd probably eat the entire thing and get fat, but we don't want to do that.
I have a sugar coma.
I'm already pretty big. So.
All right, so let's get into what we're going to be kind of talking about today, what we're drinking today, and then we're just going to polish it off at the end with what we're going to be talking about in the future. I know we've kind of every week or so been like, hey, we're working on this. We're going to do this. We're doing this. We just kind of actually sat down for the first time.
We actually have a plan.
And we planned.
We have a plan in place.
I feel so legitimate now.
I mean, we keep... So I know it kind of appears that we have a plan, but we haven't had a plan for the last 12 episodes.
Fooled ya.
We've kind of just been flying by the seat of our pants, and I would show up, and we'd be like, so what are we talking about?
Like, oh yeah, this stuff? Sure, let's wing it.
So we've actually kind of got a plan, and we'll go over that a little bit at the end of the episode, so you guys kind of know what to look out for and what to keep an eye out for, and keep telling your friends to say, hey, come listen to this cool podcast with these 2 dudes talk about horror shit and Halloween Horror Nights and stuff.
Today, I feel like it would be fitting just to kind of go over that last speculation map that Horror Night Nightmares dropped out. They dropped the What Would Have Been edition, which was pretty much the last map that they were going to put out before the event kind of rolled on. There is just the ever most slightest changes on a handful of the houses. So this might not be a longer episode, and we say that all the time, and then we stretch it out for an hour. But a lot of the stuff that you will say about this is probably stuff we've already said before.
Yeah, I no longer think that we don't have enough content. I mean, for the first few episodes, all I ever thought to myself was like, we were gonna have enough to cover like 45 minutes, and we'd go for an hour and a half. So I no longer question it. I'm pretty sure at this point we could talk for an hour and a half about nothing.
Yeah. Either way, we'll just kind of find a way to string it along a little bit. Before we dive into that map, let's jump into what we're going to be drinking tonight. So what'd you bring over tonight?
So I got something really special for tonight. I mean, kind of special, at least to me. So we talk a lot about the bottle shop that we go to, peruse a lot. We mentioned it last week with Kevin. The bottle shop itself carries a lot of crazy stuff, and every time I go in there, I always tell myself, you need to stop for at least for a little bit and just go through their bottle wall. So you've got your coolers with all the cans and stuff in it, and then they've got a couple walls of just bottled stuff. And if you're a beer person, you know that bottled stuff typically has is where the good stuff is, and it's where they have a lot of the aged stuff that's been around for a very long time. So they've had a stock of Jester King, which is a brewery out in Austin, Texas, and I'll go into them a little bit in a minute. But Jester King, if you're a beer person, you know who Jester King is. You know what Jester King does, and if you don't, you should really look into them, and if you get a chance to try it or get it, don't hesitate, because Jester King is some of the best beer I've ever had. And I know that I say that a lot about other things that we bring in, but I'm being totally 100% honest. This is kind of like, so that's why when we had Jolly Pumpkin the first couple times, I was surprised because I didn't know anything about them, and when I tried them, I was like, wow, this is really good stuff. See, Jester King, it's kind of along that line, but I know Jester King, and I've known Jester King, and I've never had a chance to try it. And now that I've been in Orlando for 2 years, and I've been going to this bottle shop for 2 years, I finally took the time to actually look and pick some stuff up. So that's what we're having tonight. It's Jester King. It's called El Cedro or El Cedro. I don't know how to pronounce that. I apologize. Again, I'm terrible with names. It's nothing horror specific, but the bottle art is really cool. It looks like a haunted tree or an evil tree, kind of like something you would see in like Lord of the Rings, or I don't know, like I'm trying to think like other scary trees. But
from Harry Potter.
yeah, maybe, but like it's got eyes, and obviously its bark looks like teeth. And the reason it's a tree is because this particular beer has what they call cedar spirals in it, so they must use cedar in the brew. Essentially, Jester King is known for their farmhouses. I know we do that a lot. We have a lot of farmhouses on here, but farmhouses are awesome, and we like farmhouses. Bottle itself says, "I have conquered many nations and defeated vast armies of men, but even I do not dare to trespass in the forest of El Cedro. For El Cedro is no man. Many have ventured within the silent reach of his branches, lured by his sweet smell, never to return. Whispered legends tell of one particular sorry soul who, hey, did we tell you this has Brett in it?" Jester King is an authentic farmhouse brewery located in the beautiful Texas Hill Country on the outskirts of Austin, Texas. We make farmhouse ales and spontaneously fermented beers tied to a time, place, and people. So this one is a farmhouse. It was brewed in July of 2017. So this has got 3 years, actually just past 3 years old. So this is going to be really sour, and it's going to be really good, and I can't wait. It was batch number 8. Batch number 8, excuse me. So what's interesting about them is, again, when they brew something, they either age it in barrels or they age it how you would normally age it. But the nice thing about bottled sours is that when they stay in a bottle, a dark bottle that they come in, and they sit for a while, they do kind of, it's not like other styles, like we talked about last week, how IPAs can typically go bad or typically will change their style or change their flavor, after a certain amount of time. These sours and like stouts, the longer you age them, the better they get, essentially. Obviously, some people don't like super sour beers, so sometimes waiting too long can be a detriment to those people, but for people that like really sour farmhouse ales and ones that age well, this is definitely one of those. So I'm excited to pop it open, try it, and give it a shot. Again, El Cedro, Jester King, Austin, Texas. If you're anywhere near there and you want to check them out, I say don't hesitate. So let me pop this open, we'll pour some out, and we'll give our thoughts real quick.
Let's crack it.
That sound is really good.
Sweet sound.
Oh, it smells awesome. It actually smells kind of like a cider, but obviously it isn't a cider. Oh, Jesus. Oh my God.
Foamy fast.
Literally just foam came out of that. All right, we may have to let this sit for a minute. So do you want to talk about what we're going to talk about?
We'll dive in and we'll let that settle for a little bit.
Settle for a minute.
All right. So I think we should just start with the houses because, again, that's stuff that we've talked about previously, and we don't have to really reiterate on a lot of the things, but we'll just kind of note the changes, and hopefully, like we talked about the last time when we decided it was...
Yeah, it doesn't look like there's a lot of changes to it from the last map. They did add a couple things to a couple of the names. But they added scare zones. They added the U.S. areas. Mm-hmm. So it'll be, we kind of walked through the houses one at a time. We won't spend a ton of time kind of going over what we think about the houses because obviously we've done that twice now.
3 times over for some of them.
Just maybe we can kind of go into like, what do we think about the 2 changes? I think there's 2 changes on here, right? Or additions. I don't want to call them changes because they're not really changes. They're just additions.
Just a couple different amendments. So we'll start with A and we'll work our way through. So
yeah, that's fine.
Universal Monsters, The Brides, that didn't change. It's exactly the same. We talked about it last time.
And that was, I don't want to say confirmed, but it was essentially
as confirmed as it could be, I think.
So that was definitely going to happen.
Yeah, with the Tribute store opening being the first store in there.
Right.
We're seeing that next year. B, Texas Chainsaw. So dropped the Massacre from the title. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just Texas Chainsaw.
I don't understand the purpose behind that. Was one of the remakes just Texas Chainsaw?
Wasn't the second movie... It wasn't called just Texas Chainsaw, I don't think. But if you like the first remake was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I'm pretty sure the second movie was either just Texas Chainsaw Massacre or it may have been just Texas Chainsaw. I don't know for sure. It's been a while. I don't remember it exactly, and I didn't really like that movie, so I can understand why I didn't remember it.
So the only movie, and we kind of talked about this when we were questioning why Texas Chainsaw was on here. We were kind of going through the possibilities of what it could be. The only one that really kind of dropped the Massacre is the 3D movie from 2013, and that was one of the ones that we were like, based off of the year, based off of how scares would happen, that would make sense because you could do a lot of projections and stuff like that. So Texas Chainsaw 3D is the only movie in the series that doesn't include Massacre in their title besides the newest one in 2017, which was just Leatherface. I mean, either way, I think that's all, neither here nor there, because I think Chainsaw is going to be going bye-bye.
Yeah, I think we talked about it not last week, but the week before when we talked about the cancellation and everything. We did say that I think we both think that this one's going to be probably kicked
to the curb.
For next year. But my other thought is Texas Chainsaw. If it's just called Texas Chainsaw, I would assume that it has nothing to do with a specific movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of a house themed around just the legend of it and the character and what it's all about, and chainsaws and that sort of thing. So right, exactly.
All right. C, Bedtime Stories, The Tooth Fairy. So this was, again, on the last one, that 3 or 3.5 or whatever. It evolved from Bedtime Stories to Bedtime Stories, The Tooth Fairy. So, again, not much new to talk about on that end. D and E, again, Horror Night Icons, Anniversary House. Those are still a blanket house. There's really not much depth about the story. I mean, you could assume from the tribute store that maybe that Horror Nights Icons house was going to be heavily revolved around Jack rounding up the troops again, or having something to do with his carnival, because it has in the tribute store that Oddfellows little wagon kind of deal that could tie into the storyline at some point, but there's really no definitive way of saying that this is what was going to happen in that house. Going back, I think C, D, and E, the Tooth Fairy house, the Icons house, and the Anniversary house, I think we'll see those again next year. I don't think those are in jeopardy.
No, I mean, we're talking the 30th anniversary, and it's obviously going to be the 30th anniversary 1 year removed. So it's definitely going to be, you're going to have all three of these.
Yeah.
You're going to have Bedtime Stories, Tooth Fairy, Horror Nights Icons, and Anniversary House. Now, I'm sure we talked about it a little bit the last time we spoke about these possible houses. Do you think the Tooth Fairy is going to be a new icon?
So I don't think so, based off of the fact that the next house we're going to talk about, I think that's our new icon.
You think that's going to be the new icon?
Yeah.
It's a good point. The only reason I wouldn't believe the Tooth Fairy would be is because it's called Bedtime Stories, and the Tooth Fairy is kind of like the subtext to it, or the tagline to it.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe Bedtime Stories is a new theme that they're kind of going into, and we're going to get more than one bedtime story in subsequent years.
Yep.
So
they've done that before too, where they have different reiterations of, they had Scary Tales. They had a couple different versions of it where they can kind of just bring in new characters. Where this is where, I mean, we talked about this on one of our first episodes when we were thinking of possibilities for what a bedtime story was. The Rumpelstiltskin and Jack and the Beanstalk and stuff like that. I think it falls right in line with what you're saying, where we could see Bedtime Stories insert tagline here in following years.
I mean, there's so many different types of fairy tales
that they could
go into. I mean, I would love to see Universal throw some shade at their crosstown rivals, and do a bedtime stories like Beauty and the Beast, because I don't know how the rights work with some of those, because they're fairy tales. It doesn't necessarily mean that Disney owns the rights exclusively to those fairy tales, because there was not to get too sidetracked, but there was a graphic novel series that had come out called they actually made a Telltale game about a video game. So if you're a gamer, you know what I'm talking about, but it's called I forget the name of it. I'm sorry. I'll have to remember the name of it and remind myself, but it's basically a story. They take a lot of the classic fairy tales and they retell the story kind of as all these characters were forced from their fantastical fairy tale land
to Shrek Swamp.
Just to regular old New York City.
Oh, okay.
So they have to kind of learn to blend in and live with, and they're kind of forced into one. It's kind of like an allegory for gentrification and the shit that we've been going through lately and all that stuff. But people don't like them because they're fairy tale people. But Beauty and the Beast is in it.
Oh, okay.
And a few of the other what we know as Disney characters, but in reality they're not, Disney characters. They're just fairy tales that Disney
made
took.
It famous, but
exactly. Well, took it and made famous for a new audience essentially. So I wonder how that will work. But I would love to see them throw some shade at Disney and be like, "Hey, we got Scary Belle.
We got Bedtime Stories, Pretty and the Monster."
Yeah, exactly.
So we just referenced F. Twisted Tradition Pumpkin Lord. So this one did get a little bit of, not necessarily an upgrade, but a reiteration.
Well, was it called Pumpkin Lord in the last map? I don't remember it being called Pumpkin Lord.
I think it was
called
Pumpkin King.
Something Pumpkin.
Yeah, it was Pumpkin King, I think.
And they added Twisted Tradition to it too, I think.
And Twisted Tradition was the name used previously. It was used in those stories that they were posting up on their Universal blog.
Okay, so that's probably what, like you said. So yeah, I mean, you're right. I think with that, that with that in mind, I think the Pumpkin Lord probably would be a new icon.
And I hope so, because what we've seen, which we'll kind of talk about later, but what we've seen of it is I'm super into it. If it's that similar build from that, I think it was 2018, that Harvest Scare Zone, then that would make for a really cool icon. G, moving right along, Mannequin Theater, which, God, I hope we get that next year, because that still is my number one kind of like most anticipated house, just because I'm so curious.
Now, I'd be kind of bummed out if we don't get Mannequin Theater.
Now, I think that what I heard was this was almost made and catered around the possibility of a COVID style event. So I'm hoping that they don't scrap it because it was made solely to cater to that. But from what I heard, I could be way off. It could just be a house.
Well, that's interesting then, because like we could talk about that for a minute. Because like when we say it's rumored to have been based around some sort of COVID,
just so that it would be easier to portray that house while following whatever guidelines was implemented upon them.
I thought you meant like themed in some way around COVID.
You walk in, you get sprayed in the face.
So then, if that's the case, then I think the idea would be that there wouldn't be any scare actors in this one, or very little scare actors, because it's mannequins.
Yes.
And mannequins are terrifying. Like we can all agree that mannequins are one of the scariest things about shopping.
I think this would have been a big like smoke and mirror style house. But other than that, that's what intrigues me so much is the mystique.
Yeah, and I think my guess would be that they won't get rid of it necessarily, because it's an interesting take on the house. Like, you're so used to just basically having a lot of the scare actors and the noises and stuff, but this one, I think what makes certain houses scarier is less of that. That's why I hate jump scares in movies, because they're not scary to me. It's like, oh, you made me jump. That's cool, but I like houses that create an ambiance or a mood, or create some sense of dread. So if you put me in a room full of mannequins, or a house full of mannequins, and I'm not sure where things are going to come from, because everything could be fake, it could be real, that's what's scary. So that one, I do kind of hope they kind of follow with that theme a little bit, and kind of either if they don't keep it necessarily Mannequin Theater next year, at least something along those lines, mannequin something, or something to do with mannequins. Because I don't know about you, but we've talked about it before, but that either the last room or near the end of the room for the Us house, or near the end for the Graveyard Games, where they had a lot of the fake people, that was
the best part.
That was terrifying.
So moving along, H for Haunting of Hill House. The 4 H's, not Triple H like the wrestler, 4 H's. H for Haunting of Hill House. That's so that's the one that I almost just caught myself and said that's got to be back next year. But we kind of talked about it. We don't really understand fully how the rights to these are going to be affected for these IPs, especially one that's owned by a pretty large company.
It's been pretty consistent on all these maps, so I think we can consider it confirmed for this year. It was definitely going to be a house this year, but you're right. Like we had spoke about before, we're not really sure how the rights work for that, so we're not really. I mean, I don't want to say it'll be back, but I have to imagine that they'll work something out.
I would think that they would have no reason to want to get rid of it. It's just a matter of if Netflix kind of goes along with that. And again, with the Haunting of Bly Manor, that season 2 should be coming out.
Right, and that'll kind of help too.
So it'll be brought back into light.
Right.
It might be a little bit confusing that you're behind the season. There's a whole different name on the house, but I don't think it's going to matter.
Yeah, I don't think it'll matter, because it'll be like the Stranger Things house, where it's like I don't care so much how much it ties into the current season. It's just seeing those characters and those props up close.
House I, we're going through Beetlejuice, which has been along for the entire ride. So that's
another one that's been with us pretty much the whole time.
Is safe, in my opinion. What I had heard was that the opening room for Beetlejuice was actually going to be the take a ticket line, that take a ticket booth, where when Beetlejuice gets kind of cut off and has that long ticket of miscellaneous numbers. So that would have been cool. And then the ending, I heard, who knows, this will probably change, but it was kind of along the lines of when we broke down the houses very in depth, when I said, hey, this house should end the way the movie ends, with the giant scare of the snake worm coming out and kind of crashing down and taking out Beetlejuice. Supposedly that's how the house would have ended. Who knows if that will stick or if that was actually true or not, but that's just what I had heard. And then J, this is another one that kind of got a little tagline change. So this one is now the Demons of Billie Eilish. So She's still sticking with us.
Yeah, this is a title change. Like this isn't so much a tagline. It went from just kind of being Billie Eilish to the demons of Billie Eilish. So this is obviously, it's more or less giving us a little bit more of a taste about what the theming will be. And this is kind of the one I really wanted to talk about because obviously this is the biggest change. And like we had said, there's a few changes, but this is to me the biggest change on the map. And it really does kind of make me think, so where were they going with it? Obviously, if you know anything about her music, you know about the artist, she definitely gives off that just eerie vibe. She's got that really brooding melody to the music, and it's very like haunting, and she's a very haunted person. It seems like this, I don't want to say it'll be a personal house, like getting too personal with her, but I bet you she's going to really kind of open up to a lot of the things that either she's dealt with in her life or what she's like battled, and kind of releasing a lot of that in a constructive way by coming up with a haunted house, or it could just be something completely fabricated. I don't know, but it's an interesting title. That's the only thing. It's a title that really interests me in what it could be.
And I'm not sure where I heard this, but I had heard somewhere that the facade was going to be like a big open book, like a journal, and it was going to kind of be walking into the journal of Billie Eilish, kind of going through her thoughts, and as the title of the house would say, the demons of Billie Eilish. So whatever she may be dealing with or whatever, whether that's, different forms of anxiety, depression, and they kind of manifest that into demons of sorts. It's a pretty tough concept, I think, to nail if that was the way they were going to go with it, because as people with, depression, anxiety, and all that stuff know, it's a very internal struggle. It's not as much of an external thing where, like, you can't visibly see it.
That is for sure.
So pushing that out into a visual house is an interesting concept to see how they would kind of present that to us. That's all I have for the houses. And like we said, that's the what would have been edition for the houses. So in between talking about the houses and the scare zones, let's want to discuss this beer a little bit.
Yeah, the beer finally worked out.
Because we let it settle for a little bit.
So it finally settled. And again, I don't know if that comes from the age or if it comes from me just not chilling it long enough. But I had a few sips already, a few hearty gulps, and I'm not gonna lie to you, this is awesome.
I like this one.
If you want to, you can follow me on Untappd, which is a beer tracking app if you're using it. If not, no big deal. But I gave it an elusive 5 out of 5. It's really, really complex, and I'm not gonna spend a ton of time going over it. But I mean, it's really complex. It's got that natural flavorings you get with a farmhouse, but with the cedar thrown into it, like the cedar rounds, which must be cedar bark or cedar something that's brewed with.
Yeah.
It gives you a really, really, really interesting flavor profile.
That smell, I can't put my finger on it, but the smell is not great. It smells like a rotten something.
Yeah, the nose definitely does not, the nose belies how good the taste is.
The taste is better, but the smell is pretty not amazing.
I mean, it's not your typical farmhouse sour. It's a typical farmhouse. It's not even that sour, really. I mean,
I don't want to say old socks, but like
I didn't look up whether it was brewed in barrels. I would assume that it's been aged in something, but it's a saison.
Like it's got that.
It's really intense. It's really hard to explain. If you can find a bottle of El Cedro, buy it. Like, don't wait. I would buy that in a heartbeat. This is really interesting. It's really, really good. Again, I gave it a 5 on Untappd. Find me there. I'm at SCH5500. Again, that's SCH5500. Find me on Untappd if you want to. But I gave it a 5. It's really, really unique and good. But I like unique beers. So take my opinion not necessarily with a grain of salt, but just understand that I like interesting flavor profiles and interesting, unique takes on certain styles. So I liked it.
If you are not a deep beer drinker,
you're probably not gonna
I would
like
not
it.
Suggest it. Even for me, it's a little bit more on the harsher side to take down. It's just the smell is weird.
Yeah, it's not a culture thing. It's not like,
and the taste isn't bad.
It's different.
It's pretty flat to begin. It feels like there's no taste in the beginning, and you get all of it at the end. Mm-hmm. For me, it's very smooth.
Oh no, it's a heavy on the end.
Yeah,
it's not as much on the front and the beginning of it. And I think that part of that's the age. As it ages, it kind of changes where on the palate it hits you. It definitely lingers. That's the one thing I've noticed. That like a lot of the beers we've had lately,
come and go.
It comes, goes, and it doesn't stick around. This one, it lingers for about half a minute or so, and you still it sits there and it resides there. The mouthfeel is awesome, and I don't hate the aftertaste. Like the aftertaste isn't like some beers that have an aftertaste and it's like, oh my god, it's gross, go away. But this one,
it pulls you in for that next.
Yeah,
sip.
I'm like I want more.
Yep. So let's jump into these scare zones because for me, on the outside and looking in, the titles alone are pretty broad. There's not a ridiculous amount of detail given on 2 out of the 4 that are given.
Yeah, and
two out of
it's
the
a little
5.
interesting too because they've got a couple with the names. It's almost like they could be the same thing.
And that's where
You know what I mean?
I don't know what blends where. So K, we have an anniversary zone.
Do you want to kind of explain where these would be? So K would be right as you walk into the theme park.
Yep, that's right where
So
the
last
arcade
year
was.
where the fake game stations were and the stilt girls were walking and stuff.
Arcade.
Yeah, Anarcade, excuse me. Yeah.
So that is an interesting spot. So I would assume that like where all of the arcade games were would be some sort of nod or statue or something to represent one
That's
of
actually
the past things.
that's not a bad idea. Not a bad guess. Almost like a Roman aisle of statues of like all the great like something along those
Things.
lines. Like
and that's
either
where
that's icons or
and that's the anniversary zone. We have Horror Night Icons and Anniversary House as houses. So one's
Right.
icons and then the anniversary house is
right. And the other thing too, not to cut you off, but like the anniversary house is on the complete opposite. Would have been on the complete opposite side of where the scare zone is. So
over on the left of Men
So
in Black.
it's almost not even like those two would be related.
Yeah, and then who knows? So we know the icons are going to be in the house. In the anniversary house, we're just left to assume that that's a kind of best of HHN.
Yeah.
That doesn't involve icons. So we're talking
Right,
like
because if
the Leave It
icons
to
have their own
Cleaver,
house, it's got to be something like you said. It's
Leave It
like
to Cleaver, Dungeon of Terror. We can do like the Scary Tale, something
Carry
like
Ohio,
that.
that sort
Carry
of thing.
Ohio. Anything that's kind of Horror Nights that's not icon related would
Right.
be in that house. Now with the Scare Zone, I don't know if that's the same thing. I don't know if the anniversary zone would include icons as well.
yeah, I don't know.
I would guess no.
I'd probably right. And if to me, if it's the first scare zone you're walking into, I always kind of assume that's like their welcome to Horror Nights.
That's their
this is
marquee
what you're
right
into,
there.
like in for.
Mm-hmm.
And like last year, it wasn't. I don't really. It was a scare zone because they had the guys walking around with the chainsaws and the girls that were like on the stilts. And I don't think there were any guy stilt walkers. They're all girls. But I don't mean to like. I'm not trying to be sexist or anything like that. They're just all girls.
All stilt walkers are girls.
Yeah, they were all stilt walker girls. They weren't guys. There's a reason probably for that. But the point is like it was kind of like hey, this is the theme. You're walking into the 80s. This is the Anarcade. It's the arcade.
You had the music going.
The music, the loud music, and everything
cheap
else.
little lights, the fog.
Right, and the fog machines and stuff. Like so, that kind of gave you like a taste of what you're gonna be in for as you go along. And then they would get kind of a little more subtle as you went through the park. But so like if you're doing an anniversary zone at the beginning, I can't imagine that it would be anything having to do with icons unless it's like pictures or murals or statues or like you said or something along those lines.
Yep.
But I don't know.
I think it would be a very, when we talked about it before, I think it would be very Carry Ohio based. Because
Maybe.
there's a lot of stories that pull from there.
Right.
Which again also tie into icons with Caretaker and Cindy Kane, his daughter.
Right.
So I don't know if it would touch on that, but I think it would pull from other Carry Ohio like folklore.
And I wonder if maybe Universal is trying to kind of not separate the two necessarily, but at least kind of like have their own lanes.
Yes.
Where like icons are icons, and that's one lane, and then Carry Ohio and the rest of like that theming, that scene, what do we call it? That setting is kind of like the anniversary stuff.
Because yes, HHN 30, obviously it's going to be icon heavy, but you don't want it to be everywhere. You can't have 3 icon houses, 3 icon scare zones, and like have that. It's just that would be too repetitive for me.
Yeah, I think it's too much. I think you got to kind of keep it. Not obviously 30 is supposed to be a celebration of the history of HHN, but don't have everything kind of be the same thing.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
That would get very tiresome. So the next scare zone again is another one that is like, what the fuck is this? So 30 years, 30 fears.
Oh, right, yeah.
So like it's.
And this is
not the
same. And this is as you go down and around. This is where the zombies were from Zombieland.
Zombieland 2 was.
So where the essentially this will be where bedtime stories and icons houses are or were. Excuse
so,
me.
30 years, 30 fears. What?
So this is where I think the icons will be. Not to cut you off
Yeah,
again.
that's yeah.
This is where I think a lot of the icon stuff will be located because it's right outside the house.
Yeah.
Or would have been right outside the house.
Yeah. That would be a good way to tie it in. If
Yeah.
you could tie a scare zone
right.
into
And,
the
and it's
house.
the biggest scare zone. It's the largest scare zone in
Yeah,
length. So, I
it
mean,
is,
like,
yeah.
it would definitely kind of be, this is where their bread and butter was going to be. Like, this is where it's going to draw everyone. Everyone's going to be drawn in this direction because this is where that is. So it has to be the biggest space.
Yep. And that's the one where the stage usually, there's
There'll
a
be
stage,
right?
So that's where you could bring
There'll be a
in-
couple prop stages, actually, technically.
Yeah,
because
you
they've
have
got the
where
one
that, like, ticket booth
right
was
where
out
the
in front
ticket
of
booth
Mummy.
was for the money ticket booth and stuff,
Yep.
and then the stage where they went up and beat the zombie's head and whatever. Like that stuff will be kind of like in that area. But
So that's where I would see Jack kind of having a stage show, maybe trying to usher people or push people into his house
yep,
to get,
yep.
guests to the carnival
Yep.
or, trying to sell his show or whatever. So I could see that being in there. But the fact that it goes 30 years, 30 fears, there's got to be some sort of callback into the first one.
Oh, of course.
Or, and there-
Right, and when they say 30 years, 30 fears, like, are we talking, are they going to go, like, are they going to pull something from every single year and bring it back? I mean, that's a lot to fit in one scare
You
zone.
have to fit 30 things in there. You have to at least, if you're going to call back 30 years from now, you have to pull something from
Right.
Fright Nights. which
And
is
that's where the
one.
store is, too.
And
what
that's
what
right
the-
where
what
the
the
tribute
tribute
store
store is, too. So it makes sense that's where they're going to stick this type
Keep
of
that
scare zone. That's
corner.
where it's going to
Yep.
be. And maybe that whole corner, that not just that strip of land, like that whole area where the roller coaster is and Mummy and everything else is. I mean, you talking 30 years, 30 fears. Mummy was a big one.
Yeah,
So I
and
mean,
that was an
you're
iconic
right near the
yep.
Mummy ride, and that'll be one of the rides that are open.
Yep.
So I mean, that makes a ton of sense to pull something from that in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to guess too much about what would it be because
Yeah.
there's just so much you could pull from. There's so much you
Exactly,
could
yeah.
have.
We could
I mean, the stage show could be the Crypt Keeper. It's
Yeah.
something from that whole theme.
that first
from
generation
the dungeon
of
terror or whatever.
So that's gonna have a callback at some point, I would assume. And if it's not in a house, I would assume hopefully there, whether it's just a like a rat lady nod or something like that.
Right.
So moving down, we have Tara Crentis. She's going to be getting a scare zone. So she went from the first speculation map from a house to Gone.
Yeah, and she'll
to
be where
an icon house to now she's back into a scare zone potentially.
Yeah, and they have her where Rob Zombie was.
Yep, and that's a good little area too because if you remember that scare zone, there was a lot of stage setups. You had like the
Decent
Rob
amount of
Zombie
room,
chair.
yeah.
You had the cars. So
As long as it's not super loud and
Yeah.
obnoxious like that one was.
with the Terra Crentis, you're going to need that space for set designs because we went into Terra Crentis pretty in depth on one of the episodes, one of the first ones. But that's where you can have like the Terra Throne, the Terra Blade.
So I
and,
wonder
like,
if there'll be like a bunch of scantily clad ladies in this scare zone too, because there wasn't the zombie one.
God, you could only hope. Other than that, because we can't really keep going on that one.
Yeah, I don't know enough about Tara Crentis to really give my opinion.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's interesting that she would be the only one that has a specific
Yeah, that's different.
one for her.
Because if she's an icon, so either they don't consider her as big an icon or big enough to have her own.
I
have
think
her own.
I think she's big enough.
I think
where
her
she has
story has a big enough. From what you were
Exactly,
telling me,
yeah.
I think it sounds
It's
like
a
there's a
very-
lot of lore there.
Yeah, it's a very in-depth story, and I think because she hasn't really gotten a full kind of icon
House
house
or
like
anything.
recognition,
Yeah.
that this would be the way to kind of bring that
Like
in.
coronation almost for her.
Yeah, I mean, Jack has headlined events, Caretaker's headlined events, Chance, Lady Luck, they've all headlined
Right.
events, and so they can kind of mash into the icons. I don't believe she's ever had that full recognition, so this would
Right.
kind of be a good way to do it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
So unknown original would be the next one, and that is N.
And that's where the
And that's
where the
bridge,
Vikings
that
were.
was the Vikings.
Yep.
So guess is as good as mine.
That could be anything. I
Yeah.
mean, literally anything. So it's almost like pointless to try to figure out what it would be. But
Robot zombies. Next.
yeah, right. I mean,
Who knows?
Obviously, their original stuff is my favorite. So I mean, it could be. I mean,
Yeah, they
anything they do, I'd be happy
Yeah.
with. Like I was saying last year, I want them at some point to do a Viking that Viking type of thing.
Undead into
That's
house.
Nordic type of house as a house,
Mhm.
not a scare zone. So I'm down.
And then all the way in the corner where Vanity Ball was,
Yeah,
we have
as we're
Creep
coming
Show.
around where Bourne is now. It's
we
Creep
have
Show.
Creep Show. So that is the one.
That's interesting.
That one's got to be set in stone, I would think. because that one has been
That was on the other map, the last map.
Been on there for a
besides this one.
while, yeah. And then it's
Which
a
is
good little
cool.
scare zone. It reminds me, it's hard with Vanity Ball. Obviously, it wouldn't be set up like that with that main stage. But if you think back to when, I think it was 2 years ago, they had Chucky over there. Chucky had like a little box area, and you had an animatronic Chucky who would talk and stuff like that.
That's cool.
So I think it would be very similar to that.
Creepshow. I mean, again, I talked about it a little bit when we first started. Creepshows. It's interesting. I'm still a little wary about how they would make Creepshow a scare zone outside of just having the different stories from Creepshow as part of it. But like we're talking like trying to fit 30 fears in there. I mean, Creepshow, it's very, all of the stories in that movie is very disparate. So it's like they're all very different from each other. So I don't know how that would work, but obviously I'm not gonna. Universal could find a way to do it. So
if anybody could, they would.
Interesting, very interesting. And for me, it's interesting, kind of the order they did it in. Like I would almost think that Anniversary should be near Anniversary House.
Like how they have that 30 years in
front
of the
I mean, I just feel like it's kind of disjointed if they do it that way.
And that's tough too, because like where Anniversary House is, where Pumpkin Lord is, and where Mannequin Theater is, there's really not a scare zone around there, and they also don't have
but that's also why I think. And again, this is just a spec map, so obviously we're not saying this is confirmed or anything like that. But we're talking about how Texas Chainsaw. We think it's a throw-in, right?
Yeah,
and they've got it listed here like in one of the marquee areas. This is where Ghostbusters was, or not where Ghostbusters was, but where the Yeti one was.
Yep.
But I mean, that to me, that's still a marquee because that's where that's what the traffic flow is. I would have assumed Texas would have been thrown in the back where the anniversary Twisted Tradition and Mannequin Theater are, because let's be honest, the ones back there are kind of like, they're not throwaway. But that's where they kind of put their newer originals where they're not really sure how it's going to do. So they stick those in the back.
Yep.
And they end up not really having a ton of traffic just because nobody thinks to go over there. Or even H&I over where Universal was, the monsters were. I'm more surprised that they didn't stick Anniversary House where Texas is. And even Beetlejuice where Monsters is.
So my thought on that.
But then again, this is just spec map, so who knows?
Yeah, who knows? So I'm going to speculate a little on my own. I would, if I had to just randomly guess as to why, I would think that B, where Texas Chainsaw is, was meant to be a bigger IP, like a Candyman or something like that.
That's true.
And then when the movie got pushed, that IP dropped.
True.
And everything else was already kind of being built in the process, and they're like, well, shit. Like, instead of moving one house to here to there, would be a
pain in the ass.
We're just gonna move. We'll deal with one house versus two. So
for sure,
who knows? That's just like complete. Off the top
and
of my
head, I'm still crossing fingers and toes and everything else that they actually drop Texas and they bring back Candyman, because to me that's interesting. That's new. That's something that we've never seen before, and it's such a good movie. The original is such a good movie, and I can only imagine what
would come of it.
What's going to come with the new one, especially with Jordan Peele doing it. So
yeah, he'll crush it.
And they have, like we said before, they've obviously got something with Jordan Peele. They've got some sort of standing.
They worked with him, so they got his number.
Yeah, so they've worked together already. So
that is the speculation map version 4.0, the what would have been.
Yeah, and it looks like all of the same rides will be open. Be open. Hollywood Ride, Transformers, Mummy, Simpsons, Gringotts, and Men in Black.
Womp womp. We will not be going to this in a couple weeks.
No, we won't. It's sad, but. Like I said, I'm looking at the positives, and it's going to give
be a killer.
Yeah, it'll give Universal a whole another 12 months to put together an amazing show for next year, and it's going to be great. And they're going to add 3 houses, and it's going to be an extra scare zone.
And it's going to be free, and it's going to be
free. They're going to bring us on as media. We're going to get to interviews with people. It's going to be great. None of that is going to happen.
Yeah. That would be great.
But I'm just saying.
The only other stuff really other than that to talk about is the tribute store. So they've kind of slowly been adding more and more merch in there.
And I haven't really gone yet. So we are planning a night to go together and maybe do a vlog of it. So you'll see some video. But I have yet to go over there. So has anything been added to it?
So they've added so not room-wise. Merchandise-wise, they've added a couple things, but nothing super of note of other than one shirt. So all the other shirts we talked about previously were the like anniversary ones. It was like 91, 92, 2000, stuff like that.
I have to imagine they're going to add more of that type of merch.
They added...
As Halloween gets closer?
Yeah, they added 2 or 3 shirts now at this point that are like icon related, where it's like 30 years, 30 years.
I gotta get over there because I don't.
And
have...
it's got caretaker, director, storyteller, Jack, stuff like that. So that's all stuff they've added, like pins, cups, face masks, lanyards.
I gotta add to my T-shirt collection.
Yeah, so they
I
got
need
a lot
T-shirts.
of cool stuff.
I gotta get over there and buy a whole bunch of stuff.
The one T-shirt that had everybody talking, that we can kind of cue into what we just talked about with the scare zones, was this Universal Studios Halloween Horror Nights Big 30th Issue T-shirt. So it looks very comic booky. On it, you'll see it says featuring the Pumpkin Lord.
That's
it also
so
has
sick.
with blood and bone, select cuts with meaty meats, and it has a little surprise guest in the corner. Now, this was, I don't want to say found out to be the Scare Zone shirt, but I think the tag on it, or it implied that, or when it rings up, it says like Scare Zone shirt. So
it's amazing the level of
trying to detective
the level of detectiveness for people.
It's insane. So I'm not sure where these things fit into the Scare Zone we saw.
Does this? I mean, to me, it almost confirms the Pumpkin Lord is a new icon,
and that's why when you asked me about the Tooth Fairy, that's why I was like, I think because this.
Yeah, that makes
this character.
Obviously, I can see where you're coming from. Then that definitely.
It's very prominent, and he looks different a little bit.
He looks sick. He's got like horns and shit. He's like.
He looks a little bit
demon
different.
Pumpkin.
So the one in the top left corner, like just the pumpkin head with the mouth open and stuff, that's kind of the similar to the Scare Zone actors from The Harvest from 2018, whereas the Pumpkin Lord looks like a kind of altered version of that, where his hands could be like roots, and he's got the little down billy goat horns that kind of resemble like the stalk of the pumpkin.
Yep.
So it's a different take on that. So maybe those like Stilt Walker-y characters that were those pumpkin characters are kind of his minions.
Yeah, so, I mean, that also kind of leads to credence, I think we were saying beforehand when we first started looking at these maps. I think that he's going to be related to that Harvest at some way. So it's going to bring that theme back, and he's going to be like the Pumpkin King, like, we are the Pumpkin King, like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But he's a badass Pumpkin King. Like, not like I'm a jolly happy pumpkin Jack, yay, Christmas. No, he's like a legitimate, like, I'm going to eat your family, like demon, which is awesome.
Or if you think into like, if like jack-o'-lanterns or pumpkins that are sprinkled at people's houses,
right?
Those are his minions, and they come to life.
That's awesome.
They expand out and take the towns over by killing the killing the families in the houses that put them out.
That legitimately makes that house so much better.
So that would be
so much more interesting.
So with that, I think that kind of confirms the Pumpkin Lord in a pretty high capacity. Mm-hmm. But where he would be in the Scare Zones, I'm not exactly sure. So maybe he would come in the 30 years, 30 fears anniversary, maybe.
But would he, if he's got a house, why would they?
Maybe he's the unknown original Scare Zone, because
he could be, I guess.
The shirt was. This is all speculation. So if the shirt rings up as Scare Zone and he's on it.
Yeah, I guess if that's what you're looking at, if it rings up as Scare Zone, I guess that kind of makes sense. But then again, that could just be how they list it in their SKU. I mean, it may not mean really anything.
And it could mean nothing. You're right. So the other characters on here, I mean, the Ann Bone was a character from 2018, I think, as well. I actually had a picture with this character.
Oh, dude.
So I had that. The Meats Meat, we talked about that. It's a Cary, Ohio thing. So a lot of this stuff is HHN non-icon. So that makes me think that it would be in that front anniversary zone versus that 30 years, 30 fears, where we think it might be a little bit more icon-centered, being that it's in front of the icon house.
And I still think that it's icon based, but it's more than just icons. Like, because obviously, when you say 30 years, 30 fears, I think it's just history of everything they've ever done. There may even be something. My thought is, you said there was an extra room in the store that wasn't open. I have a feeling that it wasn't just store, that it was going to be some sort of like HHN museum, and they're going to have stuff from the previous 30 years kind of on display.
Yep.
It may be part of the store too, but like, that makes me think that if that was where the Scare Zone was going to be, that leads more credence to that being the case.
Yeah, I could see that. So that was really it for HHN news, and I have a feeling that might be one of the last HHN really newsworthy things we're going to get for a little bit.
Drop for at least the next few months.
Now, I mean, we might get some more merch here and there. I could see if that third tribute store opens, that's something else to talk about.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on it.
But other than that, I think that HHN news is just kind of on the back burner in regards to when we're going to get actual news for the event. Your guess is as good as mine. I think being that I would hope this event is what we get next year. It would be smart on their part not to spend the money again.
I mean, I would be so surprised if they come out and say we rethought everything and anything you saw last year, forget it, because it's all brand new stuff. Although I don't put it past Universal to do that, to make everybody speculate and give everybody the thing, but I can't imagine that all the work they put in putting this one together, that they don't keep 90% of it.
Financially, it makes
I don't think
zero
that,
sense.
Like we talked about it two episodes ago. There are houses that I think are going to get changed or dropped. Texas, it's gone. I personally think that. Because Texas, I think, was supposed to be Candyman, like you said. Supposed to be another.
That was me just kind of spitballing.
I still think
that, IP.
But I still think you're right. I still think it was supposed. Because think about it, the movie's coming out this year. It's a Universal property.
Yeah.
That was going to be the
sense.
IP. I think because of the movie being pushed and obviously COVID and everything else, it hasn't happened. So they put Texas because Texas they've done before. We've talked about this already. That one I think is gone. But do I think they're gonna redo the entire event? I doubt it.
What I hope that leads into is Universal giving us information way sooner than we normally would.
I'm hoping they drop stuff all year round.
Exactly, and that's my thing is I hope on maybe either what would have been opening night,
they do something.
What Halloween is, that they start to make an announcement, whether it's just a TV ad with Jack saying we'll see you next year, whether it's like we've seen a million times with like Killer Clowns or Stranger Things, those little IP-based promo videos.
Yeah.
One of those.
I'm still kind of hoping that they might re-theme one of the stores.
Mm-hmm.
Not just a tribute store, but have or Halloween-themed stuff, whether it's outside, a store or outside, or do some of the food things that they usually do.
God, if I have to wait another year for Twisted Taters, I'm going to cut my...
PC. Trying to stay PC.
If I can't get Twisted Taters, I'm going to be very...
I'll tell you, those pumpkin donuts are...
Oh, my God. Just, if not for nothing, just open up a HHN, food stand for, the junkies.
People will show up just for that.
Yes.
I'll go just for that.
Just put one out. You don't need to do much. Just put one little food right where
if I can buy
Central
pumpkin
Park
donuts and a pumpkin head beer. I'm set.
And I'll walk around, put up some stupid little knick-knacky decorations or whatever, and just let me pretend.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll bring in a personal fog machine and I'll just walk around with it.
They'll do something. They've got something in the works, I'm sure. It's just that obviously, like we spoke about before, I think this year was just for the safety of their employees and the safety of everyone else. It makes more sense to not do it.
So hopefully we get something thrown our way, and I think that's why they're going to be so quiet for a while, because they're trying to react.
They're trying to
what's the best
get their bearings, and like we said before, we don't know what's going to happen. This thing could slow down by the end of the year. I don't think it will, but it might. And the problem with the news is that you're not going to hear the good things. You're not going to hear when the numbers are coming down. You're only going to hear when they come up. So until we stop hearing about them going up, then they obviously have to worry about that sort of thing. So right now they're just focused on getting the park situated with normal guests, and then they'll worry about after-hours events after that. But who knows? Right. Do you want to talk about what our plans are going forward? Because we got some plans finally.
We actually locked some stuff down.
So we have an actual, not schedule, but we start to really think about kind of what we're getting into, and then you guys can actually plan to say, all right, this is what this week is about, and kind of know what's coming, rather than us just being like, hey, let's talk about this tonight.
Yeah, we have a couple of things that we've done in the past that we feel are fun. We get a lot of engagement out of it from you guys, so it's just as much fun for you as it is for us, and we're going to do our best to incorporate you guys with us as well. So before these episodes drop, or even after, and we can mention you on the next episode, we're going to try and do our best to kind of shout people out, or if you want to give insight for what we're going to be talking about on that episode, you can kind of hit us up and give us that information ahead of time, and we can mention you on here. So what we're planning on...
We'll give you a shout out.
Yeah, so what we're planning on is what we did last week. We did killer reviews, where we sat down, we dissected beer a little bit more in depth, and then we dissected an actual movie, and we brought up key scenes, a little trivia, whatever, and we did that with our Uncle Kevin. We're going to continue this. We're going to do killer reviews. That's going to be the first episode of the month every month. We're going to break down a certain movie, which is going to be brought up by one of you, or if
Or just something we think about.
or if something piques our interest that week, if whether maybe a certain movie came out on a certain date and we want to do it based off of its anniversary.
Yeah, what we're gonna try to do is we're not gonna do, at least I don't want to do just the staples. Like, obviously classics are classics for a reason. So you know how good a classic is. We know how good a classic is. We're not gonna bore you with the talking points about every single classic out there. We'll do certain ones, obviously, because we have to. It's obligatory. But I want to try to focus on deep cuts and things that, like, we may know about that you don't know about, or vice versa.
Or if you give us one we haven't seen or
And,
heard of, we're gonna dive in.
And I don't know about you, but I'm totally open to everything. I love everything. So if you have,
I'll watch whatever.
If you got a crazy, gory snuff film, I'm down. If you got a ghost story, a possession story, I'm down. I may have seen it already. If I haven't seen it, great. If not, even better. So, I mean, throw ideas at us. We'll shout you out and say, hey, you know, so-and-so gave us this idea, and we're going to talk about it. I think it's a great idea. And that's going to be on the first episode of the month?
That's going to be the first episode of the month is going to be killer reviews. Now, this is going to open us up to guests.
Yeah, we'll bring guests in.
So, as soon as we kind of get more situated in our podcasting careers, whatever it is, hobbies.
Hobby.
But as soon as we're not, recording out of a bedroom,
Right.
we can bring outsiders in. Right now, we can bring, close friends and family and stuff in on that. So we're going to try to bring something in on those episodes. So it kind of
open up the discussion a little bit more between us two bozos.
Following that, the second week of the month, we're going to try to do like mock events where we're going to come up with the HHN style speculation maps based off of whatever it may be, certain genres, certain ages. And we might not even do a full event. We might just do
Houses.
a house or a cool scare zone.
Just lay a house out.
During this, we might make up like our own icon and give you a backstory on a certain weekend, and we'll get up artist illustrations on what a made-up icon is. So this is going to kind of be like mock HHN stuff for us to kind of get creative with. On the third week of the month, that's when we're going to do our top 10 lists.
Yeah, we'll call it our
what have you.
We'll call it our list/ranking episode. Yeah. We don't have a name for it yet, but we'll think of something quirky.
Insert cool name, horror related here.
But like top 10 movies we did before, we're gonna make this a regular thing, and just do different topics. And there's so many things we can do. We think it's gonna be really interesting, and it'd be good to get what you guys think about it. So.
And this is whether it might be top 10, top 5. But, we could do top 10 sci-fi, top 10 kaiju movies, top 5 Halloween movies, not Halloween the season, Halloween the franchise,
or just our personal rankings of those.
Yeah,
movies.
and we can rank those. We could do top 5 Stephen King movies to appease you.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. I mean, it's definitely not going to be top 5. It'll be a top 3, but we'll figure it out.
Regardless, on those ratings or rankings episodes, that's going to be the third episode of the month, and that again kind of opens us up to the possibility of having people on. If we have friends or family that are familiar enough with a certain genre or whatever, they're really passionate about a certain figure.
I mean, especially if it's like, for example, like the kaiju stuff. Like, I'm not a huge like monster movie type guy. I mean, I am to a point, but like, I'm not an expert on Godzilla. But we've got a friend who loves those movies, so we'll bring him on and have him school me on some kaiju.
And then
kaiju. What is it? Kaiju or kaiju? Kaiju. Excuse me.
And then that last episode of the month, that's gonna kind of be our miscellaneous episode. That's gonna be anything. That's gonna be our. We're leaving it open so that way, if we want to go do a brewery review, we can do that. If we want to talk
interviews, if we actually get some interviews lined up.
If we want to do interviews, if we want to do like HHN history, if we want to do non-horror nights events like Hallow Scream, or something like that, that'll be kind of the episode that we'll discuss those items in. So that's kind of a little calendar for you to kind of prepare or be aware of what's coming. So that way we can get you guys involved as much as we are. Because when we posted what should we do for our next killer review, we got a lot of good recommendations.
Yeah, we got a ton of them.
So we decided to pick from that.
We actually picked one.
We did. So Leah, thank you. Because we're going to do It Follows for our next killer review session.
Ooh. I've seen it. Nick hasn't, so it'll be an interesting review. We'll get one perspective from someone that has watched it a couple times, who actually adores this movie, and then someone who hasn't seen it yet.
And I'm excited.
And I'm surprised because his girlfriend loves this movie and he's never seen it.
She loves it. She has the poster, and I think I saw it on Netflix previously, and I thought it was a TV show. I watched a little bit, and then it was one of those times I wasn't in the mood to fully dedicate my attention to it, so I just kind of turned it on, and then after like 20 minutes, I was like, I'm not even watching this. I'm going to put on The Office. Like just some mindless
So you have
bullshit.
to power through it a little bit.
Which it wasn't that I didn't want to watch it. I just wasn't in the mood at the time, and then I never went back to it.
I mean, it's definitely, well, I'm not going to get into it right now, but it's definitely unique. And when you first put it on, it's kind of like, is this really like a horror movie? Like, what am I watching?
Yeah, so I'm excited, though. I've heard a lot of great things, and the fact that someone suggested it kind of stuck right out. So I was like, you know what? Let's do it.
So look out for that.
That is going to be what we're going to be doing for our next killer review. I think that about wraps it up.
Yeah, let's reserve what we're going to do next week and the week after.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. But that's just for the starting in September. So
that first week in September, look out for that.
That's when that we're going to do that. So starting September, that's our kind of building blocks. Week 1 is the killer reviews. Week 2 is the mock events / mock icons / make our own HHN stuff. Week 3 is our top 10 lists, which is not just top 10, it's top 5, anything. Top 3, whatever. It's a ranking of sorts. And our 4th one is going to be that miscellaneous episode where we just kind of do whatever we want.
We'll try to post like the month ahead of time on Facebook and say this is the month of September. This is to look out for.
Mm-hmm. And we'll be looking for suggestions. Again, each week we'll do suggestions of what you want us to either rank or what movie you want us to review.
I mean, keep communicating with us. I mean, we love talking to you guys on Facebook and Instagram and that sort of thing. I think it's so awesome when I see all these cool posts from people. It just shows how much reach we have so far.
Yeah.
We just want that to grow. So, again, things like this, we've kind of covered anything. Share and like. Send us to your friends. Make sure you get people listening to it for us. And then leave us a review on Spotify and or Apple. It helps us a lot. So thanks again.
Well, until next time, this is Nick.
And this is Shamus.
Happy haunts. And again, I would just like to thank Vampire Stepdad for letting us use his music for our intro and outro music. So if you would, just go check him out, Spotify, Facebook. Again, that is Vampire Stepdad.